I'm delighted to present you with the following conversation with Mel Gavin. Mel is an engineer and the Research and Development Coordinator at the Innovation Centre of the Institute of Technology in Sligo. God, that's a mouthful. Um, we've worked together before. Mel has always been the go-to guy. Basically, he's a walking encyclopedia, and everyone I've ever worked with that has worked with him rates him highly, highly competent, knows what he's talking about, deeply passionate about sustainability and energy efficiency, carbon reductions, but striking the balance on the social side, being reasonable. Um, yeah, and basically looking at our targets and how we achieve them critically and not blindly. So a very reasonable man to talk to about these issues. There's tips on retrofitting. If you're a buyer of a new home, what to look out for, grants, a discussion on biofuels and the possibility that the cons outweigh the pros, which links into my discussion with Stacey Malkin about the same issue. So yeah, please enjoy. Um, yeah, I'm delighted this worked out, and yeah, enjoy the conversation.
Right. Okay, we'll go from
Okay.
there.
All right. So I'll start that again then. So essentially, uh, yeah, my own motivation, personal motivation around sustainability is social, more so than environmental. I'm not disregarding the environmental aspect of it because the value that has to a healthy society. But to me, the social is priority. So the other thing that working in the field, you get to recognize that people are jaded by climate change terminology. The you know, I suppose in general, or which is a big generalization, but a lot of people find the continuous catastrophic warnings repetitive.
Yeah.
And because it happens slowly, for most of us in the developed world where we don't suffer that much from these slow changes, the message doesn't hit home.
Mhm.
So the social aspect comes in where if you consider that, the movement for sustainability and climate change at the moment is essentially to move away from fossil fuels. That's the biggest part of it, the use of fossil fuels. So the same objective would reduce human conflict, which just lends itself to all of a lot of the other human suffering that happens, without being too philosophical about it.
Go
But
for
we
all the philosophical you want, because that's
we
where my head is constantly.
well,
But yeah, yeah,
we've been fighting over resources, limited resources, since we tied stones to sticks. Um, when you talk about particularly fossil fuels, where they are a very limited resource, they're an unsustainable, literally unsustainable resource. We've probably been fighting over them for about 100 years, maybe a little more.
proper
Um,
wars. Yeah.
and that is if you examine geopolitics, you'll see that ties into so much of the conflict that we're currently living with, and the downstream impacts of that migration that concerns everyone is all plays back to that.
Yeah.
So if you just think of energy, the most sustainable energy we have is solar. Everything else stems from that. Even fossil fuels stem from that. So if we find a way to use that, distribute it, it's very electricity is very um, transmissible. It's very versatile. Solar energy creates wind energy, creates even geothermal energy. So all of that, if we can be sustainable around that, it would take away a lot of the geopolitical crisis we've seen in the last century.
Mm. And
So
migration,
and migration,
which is
yes,
a massive issue. A lot of this stuff is connecting the dots of how it's all related to one another, the
yeah,
knock-on effect it has. And you know, yeah, the immigration thing is a massive one on that. Just the war has been fought, and then
Yeah.
The immigrants that end up looking for
Well,
a
wars
place.
lead to economic crises because you can't have a stable economy when there's constant conflict. And then, people differentiate between asylum seekers and economic migrants. It's the same thing. You're just moving from a space that your life is under threat, or you're uncomfortable, or you're unhappy, to a space where your life is not under threat, or you're more comfortable, or you're happier. So it's along that spectrum,
Much
So
of
safety, comfort, happiness.
yeah,
That's the motivation to move from a space you're into a different space.
yeah, yeah.
So anything you can do to make the space you're in more sustainable, healthier, um, uh, ideally within a healthy society, will reduce the need to do that. And then people just travel for interest, which is fine.
Which is brilliant and very you'd encourage it almost so that you get a worldly view of how things work.
Yeah, as long as you're not doing it on long haul flights. Yeah.
I've done plenty of those. Yeah. And like one thing I was talking to Stacey Malkin, who works for the US Right to Know. She's a co-founder of that, and one of the things she studies is propaganda relating to sustainability, environmental issues, and one of the things that's coming up on the US Right to Know that they're releasing is the exploitation, say, of Africa for biofuels, amongst other things. Do you? This has been a burning question in my mind for a long time. Do you see the 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 issue with the potential supply coming from, say, Africa or somewhere like that for HVO fuel, the biofuels, coming into, say, Ireland or Europe, with the promise that we're reducing emissions, and paying extra for it to replace diesel, or partly, and then the problem is in Africa using the GMO crops with a lot of pesticides, destroying the soil, releasing emissions there, and contaminating the water, and talking about the immigration that it forces people on or displaces them, cuts down rainforests, all this stuff. Do you see that as that there's a potential issue there?
Absolutely.
You see it, yeah.
Every solution that is proposed needs to be examined with cynicism. That's why the cynics are actually quite useful, in that they sometimes, perhaps for different motivations, will point out problems with solutions that the rest of us are celebrating.
Yeah.
So we've seen that with electric vehicles. Or what about all the cobalt that's required and the lithium that's required for batteries? Yes, that there's a potential problem there. We know that there are limited supplies of that. They come from areas of the world where you have probably not great labor laws, or let's say less than we would accept in Europe.
Yeah.
And that has a problem associated with it. And it would no doubt already, if I'd say already has, and if it hasn't, it will have soon, will have conflict related with it. So the same with HVOs. Yes, biofuels, they're made from plant-based materials. You're solving a problem. You're taking away fossil fuel carbon. So you're taking fossil carbon out of the energy cycle and you're replacing with biogenic carbon. So great, you've done something to reduce global warming. But if the sustainability criteria of that fuel isn't comprehensive, then you have those other problems associated with. So you're
kicking the can down the road.
Global warming problem
Yeah.
in one part of the world,
Yeah.
or helping the developed part of the world meet their targets on global warming.
That's it. Yeah.
And stopping a less developed part of the world from being healthy and happy. So, you're also, I mean, we know that it has impacts on biodiversity, which has impacts on the food chain, has impacts on water quality locally. So you're just exporting. So we in the developed world, we may be buying a solution from somewhere else and exporting the cost back to the place that solution came from. That's why it shouldn't all be about global warming and climate change.
Exactly. Yeah, the longer you stare at this stuff, you realize that basing everything on the metric of emissions
Mm.
alone is too narrow of a focus, and doesn't take in all the other ramifications that come with,
Yeah.
say, biofuels. Um, the one of the things the report highlighted, and I remember it from even There's No Planet B, the book by Mark Berners-Lee. He highlighted that biofuels are bonkers. That's what his thing was, and it was just showing that, say, the palm oil in Bali or wherever,
Mhm.
even if they said it was a sustainable production, then you peek behind the curtain and you realize, oh, this isn't sustainable at all. This is a fake certification, or the
Yeah.
regulation isn't in place to ensure that it is produced sustainably, and people are, yeah, been negatively impacted by it, and nature and everything. Um, and that's, yeah, it's exact. I'm glad you see it too. And
I think a lot of people working in the field do see it, and unfortunately for like that, we have an advantage there because we see it, we read it, we kind of live with the policy and see the policy evolve every day. For other people who are vets or farmers or shopkeepers, they don't have that advantage, so they get to see the sound bites and the headlines,
yeah, they
and
don't have the time to go digging.
that's a problem.
Yeah, that's a massive
So
problem.
you have obviously trust issues with the public information,
Mm.
but especially when that is hit from other political opponents.
Yeah,
If it comes from the big Green Party and a political opponent of the Green Party decides to point out the flaw in that message, or the not maybe not the flaw, or the piece of missing information in that message, or something else, and then you have a breakdown of public trust, and of course that's
exactly.
that's tough to deal with.
Just everyone trying to tear strips out of each other.
Yeah, yeah. For politics, I'm not saying politics don't matter, but it is often for political gain. Yeah,
I always remember you saying that about environmental skeptics, that they serve their purpose.
I
And
do. Yeah,
I really, it stuck with me because I thought, yeah, actually, it's like the opposition in government. You need good opposition to be pointing out the failings.
hmm,
And I do, like, while I'm all for renewable energy and all that, I see it as big industry. And big industry is big industry no matter where it is. And every one of them have to be kept in check because it's just the system we're in. People the say and sorry if you follow the money, some of the same owners and shareholders are in fossil fuels and everything, and renewable energy and divisions. So it's about keeping the regulation and the laws in place in the correct
yeah,
order, to ensure these things don't happen, that solar panels don't get disposed in the wrong way,
yeah,
or wind farms, or that they're put too close to a house. Like, you have to find that reasonable balance between it all,
yeah,
where it's like the corporations in Dublin, that we have, or now in Cork and other places. We're happy to have them. There's money coming in, there's jobs, but we don't want to be steamrolled in the process by these massive big tech companies, you know?
yeah,
And
yeah.
it's about managing that relationship with them all. Um, yeah, I'm really glad you saw that, or you see that. Is there any environmental skeptic that you would highlight as someone you'd rate as a proper one, and not just a knockdown? Because, sorry, like, I know I have an eye for it at this stage, where you see certain environmental skeptics are a counter voice for everything.
Yeah.
Plastic, no, plastic's good. It actually helps digestibility with birds. David Attenborough is helping push those polar bears off the cliffs, or
Yeah, yeah,
all of this stuff, and you go, no, that's clearly somebody who's like a denier for hire, or looking to say there is no problem, polluting industries are fine, they don't need to do anything, there's no issue. and then there's actual credible ones that are like, hey, hold on, if we are doing this, we should do it right, and cop on. Are there any that are kind of standing out in that way?
Well, no, see, I wouldn't call them skeptics. The ones that are saying we need to do it right, they're just
Or
more
not
realistic,
skeptics?
more
Yeah.
more pragmatic. I can't think of anyone right now. That springs to mind. There was an advisor, a sustainability advisor in the UK called Jonathan Porritt, and he wrote a very good book called Capitalism as if the word matters.
Mm-hmm.
And he was defending capitalism because it's often the scapegoat for environmentalists, that it's the problem.
Yeah.
But he did make the point that capitalism is about doing more with less. But he was very clear, it's about how you do that more, and how do you do it with less. So if you have free market, unregulated capitalism, what will happen is the the capitalist will externalize as much cost as possible.
Yeah.
But if you have regulated capitalism, you will have a motivational profit, or a profit motivation.
Yeah.
But you cannot simply externalize the cost. So if you pollute from your process, you can't just say, well, that's not my problem.
Yeah.
And that was, I suppose, the message that he did. So I think that was quite a good
Yeah.
quite a good message.
Sure. I mean, a lot of thoughts on that. Look at the Swedish model. Seems to be, you can argue all you want that Sweden has its issues. It surely does. But on the environmental side, my God, the more you look at it, you
Yeah,
go, wow, with chemicals, keeping it out of the water, keeping it out of their products, helping other countries to manage their chemical emissions, um, all in the name of actually their own societal being stable, and
yeah,
um, the recycling, figuring out a way to make recycling profitable in a way as well. All of these things are really going well there, and I'd love if everyone took a page out of that book, or
yeah,
just to see that that's what's possible, if you work towards it, and it is regulated capitalism where they find the balance,
exactly.
and it hasn't destroyed their economies either. You know, the more we go into economic stress, places like where Brexit has hurt um, Brexit hurt UK, America. If it goes into a recession, they'll what's very clear is they try to unravel the regulations, so that they can say pollute more, or well, mishandle or not handle their waste properly, or whatever, the big businesses, and it's all in honor to save money,
Yeah,
boost profits. And but if you look at the Swedish model, you go, well, they have booming businesses. They're not letting chemicals into their waterways. They have smart recycling systems. All of these things where they actually earn money because they're taking the waste off the rest of the European
mhm,
countries, say, and burning it, and providing energy for homes, hundreds of thousands of homes, for electricity and heating. Like this, that's a smart country who's managed to harness capitalism, make it work for it, and
yeah.
socially be strong as well.
And
Like,
they still maintain a social safety net. So, so education, healthcare is quite good. Okay, it's not perfect, but it's quite good.
nowhere's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And the other thing, like Adam Smith always warned about, you know, sorry for the viewer, he wrote the, God, his name escapes me now. He's called the father of capitalism.
yeah. I
Uh,
remember I remember the.
Wealth Nations. There we go.
There you go.
And his vision of capitalism, he always warned about keeping the wolves at bay. That no politician should be a businessman, or a business person. That they have to, like, you know, if you want capitalism to thrive, basically it has to be you have to keep the wolves at bay, otherwise the thing gets hijacked. And you
Mhm.
can see in a few countries around the world where it's quite completely hijacked. All the regulatory agencies,
Yeah.
all of that stuff, and business people being the politicians. So obviously there's a conflict of interest if you want a country to be run well, because they'll be obviously serving their special interests in the background where they profit off it or gain influence. And yeah, I often think capitalism is bashed too much and not the hijacking of it.
Yes, yes, it's like I know my brother is a capitalist, but I always said to him, if all capitalists are like you, yes, everything will be fine, but they're not all like him,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know.
I mean, have you ever heard of Ray Dalio, the billionaire Ray
I
Dalio?
have heard of him, yeah. I
He's
don't know
got the
much about him.
largest. Yeah, it's from my past life. I'm kind of still obsessed with the investment world a bit. But he he's always on about regulatory reform, and
Mhm.
that the system as it's set up now only serves the top 40% in, say, America, and the 60% below are hurting constantly. And if that doesn't get solved in some kind of way, then these silly bloody revolutions happen where they would hopefully be avoided if we could just kind of
Yeah.
push back and figure out in a not tear down the system way, but to
Mhm.
just optimize it so that more crumbs are broken off for the us people down here, so that the elites will probably never not be the elites. When you look all through history, there's always that higher power that seems to be profiting, but when it gets to a kind of a horrendous stage where you really feel the people are hurting down below, and it's
Yeah.
just on a downward spiral. Like America is a perfect example of that, and you go, that can't last forever, and it seems to be like their life expectancy is 8 years less than
Yeah.
Japan or Europe or somewhere in Germany or somewhere, and you're kind of going, wow, okay, that's how we need to be aware of that. That's where it goes if you
Mhm.
let big corporations and business interests just
Yeah.
steamroll us. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
But
look, that's all. We've got very big there, very global.
sorry, yeah, I
Uh,
know, I know.
no, if we bring it back to one of the local,
Yeah,
I suppose the kind of a local scenario that you mentioned, let's say home retrofit, just as
yeah,
what's the for that homeowner, what's the self-interest? Um, it's a big investment. So, there are, in Ireland, we have some, we've fairly generous grant system that we know is better than many European countries. Um, but it's still the homeowner who's going to be the biggest investor if they go ahead with a home retrofit. So what's their motivation? Now, working in the field again, so this is, I suppose, speaking more professionally, we've recognized that trying to sell it on just that you're going to be saving energy on your bills is difficult, because with a home retrofit, it is a long-term payback, absolutely a long-term payback. Um, so the other benefits that we would highlight is the immediate increase in comfort and the associated increase in health that has, particularly with, I suppose, just being warm enough, and then with air quality. If you're burning less stuff, um, then your air quality is going to improve. So
right.
that's one of the initial motivators. Some people are motivated by climate change. So again, they would do it because they feel they want to make an effort towards that, and that means that message to them makes sense. Um, so there is that as well. The other, I suppose, interest then is less about sustainability and just, let's say, the value of the property. So it's having an impact now, and that's the market reacting to, I suppose, market needs, market wants, and regulations. So definitely, the property value increases. The the other, I suppose, motivation there then is potentially economic as well, but um, it's so your choice in doing a home retrofit is either not do it and buy your energy for buy the amount of energy you need for the next 20, 30 years. And most of that energy if it's fossil fuel, is coming from somewhere else. So your money that you're using to stay warm in your home is leaving the Irish economy. So let's say you spend $3,000 a year, $4,000 a year on that energy, it leaves the Irish economy more or less, mostly. Then the alternative is to spend a lot now, but it is generally usually going back into the Irish economy. So that's some of the motivation that can work for people to say, okay, I'm making an investment now, but it's staying here locally. I'm paying a local contractor, or, at least an Irish contractor. And I don't mean that in a nationalistic sense, but a local contractor to stay in the local economy. I'm essentially investing in that as well as my property.
And the local,
yeah. So that's a possible motivation as well.
Yeah. The comfort thing, definitely. I think that just the logic of it. I'm half German, and I lived there for quite a lot of my life, and like growing up with the immersion, putting the immersion on, and the cold showers waiting for them to heat up, and then just dampness and all that stuff. That's all part of my childhood here. And then when I was, when you'd go over to visit them, you'd be taking your shoes off at the door, which is a tradition there. But it's because it's warm enough to do it, and you're walking around in majority of those houses. Jesus, I've never even worried about being cold or anything like that. That's a huge comfort. And it stays that way pretty much the whole day and night. Unless, that's a huge comfort, angle. And are the grants still as high as they were before, or as generous as they were?
The grants themselves, if you consider them for individual measures, are quite generous. So they are, the market prices obviously changes and all the time, and a lot of people would believe that once you have a grant, you're inflating the market price. And it's quite likely that is happening, but the hope would be that the price inflation is less than the grant itself. So there's still a benefit, let's say a net benefit for the homeowner. And from, I suppose, a political perspective, then at least that money is going into the local economy, into the national economy. So it is an investment in that sense. The grant structures are, again, in my personal view, problematic. So we have very generous grant structures available if you can afford to do a deep retrofit in one go, and then less generous grant structures if you're not in that boat. So you really need to be thinking, even for a small home, you're going to have a net cost of at least 25,000 to go that route. And if it's a slightly bigger home, you're thinking more in the 30s, 35 and 40,000. So if you have that kind of net money available, you'll get a deep retrofit all in one go and have a significant improvement in your house, but you're getting a lot of grant support towards the rest of the cost. So that there's things like project management grants. A lot more measures are grant funded that way. If you decide to do it in your own time for what you can afford, there is less measures supported under the current grants system. So that changes all the time. SAI do look to, they review their grants all the time, but they can't simply keep changing them. They have to let them run, get the budgets out there, and they get millions out there, hundreds of millions out there every year in grant funding. So, but I suppose ourselves and other partners, we keep asking for things we think are improvements, and have to be told, no, they're not improvements, and this is why. But if we see something, we'll keep asking SAI for improvements.
Yeah, like the whole retrofitting thing is, I'd say across the world, it's the same. It's the same hurdles you have to overcome. That it's tricky to maybe motivate people on the one side, the financial side of it as well, and I know a guy who actually works in retrofitting developments, larger ones, and he was saying his own house in Dublin, he wouldn't be that motivated to retrofit it, even though this is his whole game.
Yeah.
Because he's like, where am I going to get the whatever 40 grand, 50 grand? He's willing to take the hit for, say, external fuels, and a bit more expensive energy costs ongoing. And you're kind of like, okay, so even the guy that's doing the retrofitting himself sees this exact issue you
Yeah.
described, and he's like, it's probably the new builds are where you see maybe the biggest potential in, like,
Well, the new builds by regulation now are looking after themselves. So the new builds now are very, very energy efficient.
okay,
So the policy has improved there. The building regulations started to improve from 2012 onwards. Unfortunately, that missed the massive construction boom we had in 2008.
okay.
And that accounts for, in some areas, we would do like area analysis. In some areas, that boom accounts for 30% of homes, maybe more. And then from the other booms, let's say from the 70s maybe, and in the 90s definitely, in a lot of areas, you're looking at 60, 70, 80% of the homes that were built prior to the, any significant change in the building regulations as far as energy performance goes. So, but from then, from essentially 2012 onwards, the housing stock would be quite energy efficient. And certainly from, I think 2019, there was another change in relation to the renewables fraction that had to be supplying energy to the house. That's a big change. So any home being built now is going to be built with a heat pump. Absolutely. I doubt there's any homes being built without a heat pump, except maybe, the one-off where somebody has preference, but they're still going to have trouble meeting the building regulations unless they use, I don't know, gas liquefaction boiler or a gasification log boiler or something else like that.
And Mel, how are you finding the heat pumps? Are they, the way some new technologies come online and they're all the hype, and then like the wood chip burner, there's a fellow you and I both know who said the wood pellet burner or whatever it's called cost him, or it participated or contributed in his divorce to his wife, because he kept finicking around with it, arguing with his wife about it, getting a guy to fix it, and it never really worked. But a whole lot of arguments about it. How's the
Okay,
say?
wood for homes, can be problematic. It's a much more mechanical system. I suppose we'll talk about heat pumps separate because they are mechanical, but it's not about feeding fuel into them. The only thing you provide to them is the electricity, so that's handy. It's really about setting them right and making sure they're operating right, and then making sure the home works well with the heat pump. So heat pumps, I think we are definitely seeing an improvement in people's acceptance of them. And certainly an improvement in the market in relation to be able to get supply and service and things like that. Wood fuels, any solid fuels for homes are going to be problematic no matter how you're doing it. With wood pellet boilers for homes, there's definitely improvements there. And as long as you have a supplier who can advise if there's a breakdown or if there's a service needed, then you don't have a problem. So it's really about the supply chain as to how much risk you're taking on, or how much problems you might have. So for that instance there, obviously that person couldn't get enough information, couldn't find someone to service it, maybe couldn't get a replacement part, Sorry?
This was very early days as well. This is about 15, 20 years ago, maybe. Since
Exactly.
bought it and since the divorce.
Right. Okay. So like supply, as in a market supply, is a big part of the solution. The same with retrofitting on the whole. We don't have enough retrofit contractors out there, and we're going to struggle with that because for construction work, a lot of the market is in new build. So any capacity that goes into construction workforce is probably going to focus on new build. So we do have a supply issue there, but there are ongoing policy improvements and projects, certainly some EU funded projects that are trying to address that. and there's probably a piece around the education stream as well that needs to feed into that. A few years ago, the idea of a kid going into building after leaving school would have been sort of seen as a kind of a second-class route into the workforce. That it's a job for life, that they're going to be digging holes with a shovel for the rest of their life, and that's not the case. Not really, not in the modern construction sector. The Leaving Cert Applied is probably one of the best things that's happened in education that I know of, really, in myself in Ireland. And gave a route for kids who found the Leaving Cert exams stressful.
Yeah.
Give them a better route out of secondary education, but it still needs to be valorized a bit more. It is kind of still treated as the I suppose the lesser of the routes out of secondary education.
Yeah.
So that could be a good feed into the construction sector.
Yeah.
And then, we know as well now that there are much better routes into third level after Leaving Cert. There are much more ways to access third level. You don't have to go the Leaving Cert straight into college route. So that's improving as well. So hopefully that'll improve the supply. But I got off track there in relation to the technologies.
Well, no, it's interesting though to see that part of it, because I know it from Germany. Like they have kind of a huge book of practical apprenticeships and everything. Really thriving over there, whereas Ireland, we have moved away from it. We have gotten it into our heads that everyone needs a degree, even though a lot of people, probably myself included, weren't suited to do one, but we fell into it because everyone was telling us we should do it. But yeah, I mean, I guess it's about the long term as well, that you want to just see where it's going, and if we can make people find the right place where they're probably more skilled with their hands and whatever, then brilliant to lay that path out for them and make it socially a goal and an honorable type of work again. Not that it was never, but this idea of just going towards a degree is kind of madness, because the other side, there's not all the jobs for it. Yeah. I'm speaking from experience, because I did a degree in property studies and graduated in 2008.
Right.
Like the most comical thing you can graduate in.
At the end of the
height of the session, Mel, with the wood stove and all of that, that's quite a contentious issue at the moment.
You should probably maybe speak to somebody in IRBA, so the Irish Bioenergy Association, so that they are advocating for a greater uptake or greater support for wood fuels in homes at the residential level. Not as a not to rule out heat pumps, not at all, but particularly for homes where it would be hard to get them heat pump ready. That gives the homeowner an option to move away from turf, coal, oil, and again, they work with the market about improving the communication, improving the supply chain, improving the servicing. So it would be a good idea to speak to somebody there on that.
Track someone down there, yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Just to kind of, because I think a lot of people are just wondering where things are going. And there's a lot of whatever you'd call fake news or scare tactics out there as well, to like, what people can argue all they want about climate change being real or not, but most of us know that there's at least big environmental issues that we have to tackle that are impacting our health and everything. And then there's scare tactics, say that whatever is bad and coming down the line at us and will make us push against protecting the environment, because it's all manipulation tactics, really. And to get just some clarity of where, say, the Irish state is on stoves and everything, because you hear all sorts. You hear that they're coming for your fireplace. I know. I grew up in a rural background and work on a farm, and you know, there's trees falling over left, right, and center that we don't even have to cut down, that we can burn.
Yeah.
Um, you know, it's so like there's a nuance there probably of how to be able to work with it. Uh,
Yeah. There's space. There is space for wood fuels, certainly in Ireland. Even if that were to increase the amount of afforestation we have, because we have very little tree planting. That in itself would build up our carbon sink. Um, so there is space for it. But in general, as far as home heating goes, we should be trying to electrify everything, because for the vast majority of the housing stock, you can get a heat pump to work. But I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying for the homeowner that they would be able to afford the retrofit to get a heat pump to work. And then heat pumps are more expensive than boilers, and we know that as well. But in terms of a policy direction, yeah, heat pumps, I don't have an issue with the heat pumps being the priority, but not an exclusive priority. So if you were to look for where policy is at the moment, the best place is to start with the climate action plan. So from 2019 onwards, the climate action plan was first, I think, published in 2019, and then it was updated every year. And more so than the document itself, the document itself, talks about a lot of principles and goals and things like that, whereas the annex of actions has specific actions with some quantities and dates around it. So that would probably tell you more about, let's say, the dedicated policy.
yeah.
Even if there's a change in government parties, that they would have to come up with a reason why not to move with a certain action in an annex of actions.
Yeah.
So that would be where to go. The other thing you mentioned there, particularly around rural Ireland and turf, yeah, that's a difficult area.
I know.
But that being said, um, I don't know how much longer people will want to cut turf, go down and turn it, stack it, bag it, haul it, throw it into a shed. I'm not sure myself how much longer people will have the appetite for that.
I was in the rock bar Sally Long's in Galway lately, and there was this kind of big rocker there, and we all ended up talking about energy and nuclear and everything. And he goes, "Well, I can't wait for nuclear because I'm sick of footing turf with my dad on the bog."
Yeah, yeah,
And he
yeah,
just drank his pint, put it down, and walked off. So,
yeah.
yeah, so it
So,
speaks to what you're saying there. Like,
now, some will. I'm not saying it'll stop, because particularly there in the last few years where we had oil spikes. If you'd have shed a turf, you were a happy family. Like,
energy
um,
security.
yeah, and just not having that cost. So it won't stop overnight. Like, I suppose the policy reason for it is around bog restoration, because they have value as carbon sequestration, carbon sinks,
Yeah, yeah,
and also biodiversity as well. So that's, I suppose, that's the policy reason behind it. But yeah, you're right. The information out there is, they're going to take away your turf, and they're going to take away your fireplaces and that.
yeah. Well, it's like in Australia, one of the, I can't remember his name now, but he was like, they're going to take away your weekend, your hamburgers and your pickup trucks or whatever, so that you're not even able to whatever take a drive on the weekend,
Mm-hmm.
have your barbecues and all this stuff. And I think a lot of what's happening is a lot less bad on that side. You know, there's a lot worse things happening probably on biofuels and
Yeah,
like lab meat, which is a highly controversial topic, but the production of it in is also using GMO crops, highly
yeah,
using pesticides on it, the exact same stuff as biofuels. It's the same fuel that's going into that, and there's that stuff emerging. But then the other messages seem to be more scare tactics, that it's not as bad as you know, they're making environmentalists or people that care about the environment and recognize these issues as like they want to completely ruin your life. That
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
screwed because they're coming for you. Now there are obviously failings that have happened and all. So I'm not going to say that it's all running smoothly, but it's maybe not as bad as the media might make it out to be, especially the larger media outlets that are in multiple countries and have vested interests.
yeah. The message around loss of liberties is very strong one. People, particularly in the developed world, where we have had a lot of liberty for a long time, feel like God, we can't lose that. But that's democratic society. I mean, you know, you could say you're born free. You are, but who's going to look after you? Like, so there's laws in place that, I'm hoping it wasn't necessary, but that if my parents had not wanted to look after me, there were laws in place to protect me from that. Um,
Yeah.
you're free until you meet someone who's bigger than you, stop you from doing what you want. But in a democratic society where you have laws in place, they restrict your liberties, but they restrict your liberties to protect the larger society. So that's just where it is.
Yeah. Mel, will we wrap it up?
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
Sorry
Thanks
I was
so much.
late.
No, not a bother, not a bother at all. And I'm delighted to have gotten talking to you again. Maybe we can do it again sometime
Yeah.
when you know
You get a bit further.
yeah, and things are constantly changing anyways.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're right in the mix of it all.
Like,
Um,
sometimes there's a lot I miss. Yeah.
well, there's so much that no one can keep up with it all. Like
No.
I know people that are completely immersed in the environmental side. When you even wrap your head around sustainability, you know, people
Mm.
have an idea of it, but then you realize there's water issues, chemicals, energy efficiency, uh, biodiversity loss,
Mm.
all farming, all of these things that are, you know, like they all have the whole world is basically in transition or struggling with all of these issues. So yeah, it's almost impossible to keep up with it all,
Yeah.
which is kind of relieving to realize as well, you know, that you can't.
No. No. No.
And then all the madness of wars and just economic, general economics, like yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
Well, thanks very much. Really appreciate this. And
Okay.
thanks for all the advice as well.
Look, I hope it was helpful.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I appreciate that you recognize that about the biofuels as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
It actually kept me up one night. I was like, Jesus, is this actually happening? It is, isn't it? It probably is.
Yeah. Yeah. It is definitely. Yeah.
All right. If you're ever in
Okay.
Galway, let me know.
All right. So take it easy.
Take care. Bye.